Okay, so now coming on to the next speaker for importance of design thinking in engineering, we have Lakshmi Aburu. Lakshmi is a result-oriented professional with illustrious career in leadership roles. Her core competencies include quality assurance, delivery excellence, operational excellence, automation, lean and thought leadership, setup of quality management system, automation assessment model, determination and rollout of metrics. Lakshmi has demonstrated expertise in facilitating smooth transition of processes and stabilization of the same, while being dexterous in standardizing the process and ensuring compliance. Lakshmi has gained experience in monitoring overall functioning of processes, identifying improvement areas, and implementing adequate measures to maximize customer satisfaction level, and has been recognized as process expert for maintaining high discipline and norm adherence in line with organizational standards, coordinating with superiors for cross trainings and innovative suggestions to improve operational efficiency. Lakshmi is articulate and assertive, with ability to lead large multicultural teams and integrate their efforts to achieve organizations' objectives. An effective trainer, motivator, and administrator, having ingrained strengths to transform mediocre assembly of people to cohesive team of performers. May I request Lakshmi to please come on to the dais. Everybody please welcome Lakshmi Aburu.
Looks like I'm standing between you and lunch. Okay, so I know it's been a long day, so please bear with me. I hope you will find this session very, very interesting. And thank you so much for the introduction. As you mentioned, I joined this industry around 20 years ago, approximately 17, I think. And when I joined in, we had a very standard way of working. I don't know how many of you would remember the days back when if you had to go on to the internet, you would go click on it, connect onto the BSNL connection, it will say tring, 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 and then the connection will start. You'll be probably paying, 1,000 rupees for a 16 kbps? Can you even imagine that now? So, and in those days, what I remember, some of the very interesting things that I remember from those days is, if we talk about a standard project that would be given for delivery, it would typically take a year to deliver. A person would come in, there would be requirements, the requirements would then be converted into design and so on. There would be a long flow. The way people would look at it, our clients are kind of used to it. I come from a services industry, so I saw some of the very interesting gaming aspects, but a lot of these games were also developed in the services industry. So how does this work? If you think of any large retail client or oil clients or all of that, they would give their projects to be executed to one of the services client. The services client will say, okay, I'll do your SAP rollout, and it will probably take a year for you to do that. The clients will wait patiently. At the end of the year when we deploy, somebody will come back and say, hey, I don't think these requirements are right. And then there would actually be a set of people who will raise a change request, go back to change control board. It was a really long process. People were used to it, customers were used to it, and we were all happy. Then, suddenly there was a burst of technology. Things started getting faster. The thing which used to take us around a year earlier, people would expect it to be done in 8 weeks' time. Technology evolved. Everything became an app. What used to take us 1 year earlier, people would say, okay, can you do it faster? For example, when we spoke about, the change of technologies, if you knew WebLogic, WebSphere, you could survive for 3-4 years. If you knew some of the, starting from mainframe, then C, C++, Java, and so on, people could survive in for a couple of years before they moved to the next technology. But with this rate of technology, what happened was things were changing so fast that you had to learn continuously to keep yourself up to date. The kind of innovations that would happen started happening much faster than before. Initially, when we would look at it, we would think of an innovation that would come probably once in a year. There would be a big product launch. Over the last 2 years, what we have seen is innovations happen much, much faster. In fact, when I joined one of the recent teams that I was in over the last 2 years, some of the key things they said is, you must do innovation. Unfortunately, nobody told me how to do innovation. Everybody wants innovation. So during this period, we also saw some interesting innovations coming up, some of them extremely good successes, some of them failures, some of them which didn't click. Let me just take a quick poll by show of hands. How many of you have Android phones? How many of you have iPhones? How many of you have Windows Phone? Only one person in the entire audience. Do you know why Microsoft withdrew support for Windows? Windows Phone specifically. So what happened was, and this is a very interesting story. We always believe that a company which has large amount of money, has good market reach, has worked in the past, will always succeed with all the new innovations. The number of apps that were available on Windows were much lesser compared to all others. In fact, because of their, let's say, friendly relationship with Google, many of those apps were not available on Windows. Because of that, eventually Microsoft started withdrawing support for that. There are multiple such examples. Have you heard of something called Zoom? This was another product which was launched by Microsoft. It was very similar to the iPod that we had from Apple, where you could listen to multiple songs. But people were so used to iPods that they didn't want to shift. So what causes innovation to be a successful one, and what leads some of the innovations to fail? And that's where the thought started. So now there's a lot of focus on how do we drive this innovation. And a lot of this innovation is dependent on the users, on focusing on the users. So let me just quickly take you through some of the examples that we have. And this is personally my favorite example. This is a set of students in Stanford who were supposed to do their fourth year project. I'm sure like many of you would have to do it. They were asked to do a fourth year project. They went through the list of options given to them, and they said that, they read some numbers which said around 20 million babies die in developing countries because there are no incubators for them. So they thought, okay, this seems like a social project, why don't I pick that up? So they started working on that. Now what was the problem statement given to them? They said, develop a low-cost incubator. Now, with that problem statement, they went to Nepal to study about that. An average cost of an incubator was around 250,000 K USD. And most of the hospitals could not afford that. As a result of that, most of the people could not buy. So based on that, they went to hospitals, started talking to doctors, and they were trying to figure out how can I reduce the cost of an incubator so that more and more people can start using that. I'm not sure if it's coming up. I think there's a signal problem here, if you can help me. So I'll continue talking while this comes up. So when they started traveling around Nepal and trying to look at the numbers were mind-boggling. It was actually, 1 in every 10 newborn baby which would die because of hypothermia. That is because the baby was feeling very cold. When they started talking to doctors, they realized that many of those incubators, even in the hospitals, they are lying vacant. It is because of which, sorry, it's not showing up here. That's okay. So because of which many babies would die, in fact, on the way to the hospital. So what would happen is a child is born somewhere in the village. The body temperature of the child cannot be maintained. So they try to bring the baby to the hospital, and the baby would most of the times die on the road. A very difficult situation for the moms and the family. So instead of talking to the hospitals, they started actually going to the villages, and then started talking to the villagers about what are exact problems that you face. Why is it that so many people are dying? Then they realized it is not just about the incubator, it is because many of the mothers could not transport the child on time, and they are in such remote villages that there is no electricity. Power failure is very common. So even if you have an incubator in the hospital and you can get the baby on time, there is no guarantee that there is power. So the problem statement now changed completely. Instead of saying, how do I build a low-cost incubator, they started saying, how can I build something that will keep the baby warm? with no electricity, which can be portable. With that, what they actually came up with is a blanket for the baby, a kind of sleeping bag. And behind that bag, they actually have a small cushion kind of thing. You just need to put that in the boiling water and put it in the bag, and the temperature for the baby could be maintained for up to 4 to 5 hours without any trouble. They also had another interesting scenario. They said, okay, I have built this, but how do people know that this will work, or what is the temperature of that? Not many of them are literate. I can put some very high fancy stuff there, but how will people know? So they put up a very simple analogy there. They just had a smiley face when the temperature was right, and a sad face when it was too hot or too cold. It was as simple as that. In fact, when you look around, you will find many such examples where the focus was not on developing a technology, but on what technology do you develop, or how do you address the people. One of the biggest challenges I have come across in my career, especially when we work with people who are entering the industry for the first time, is we are so engrossed in the technology that we tend to forget who we are developing this technology for. So that's something I would recommend, we always keep the focus on. There are more and more such examples. In fact, when you look at it, there was another interesting problem that GE faced. And I'm going to be talking about more and more examples. Hopefully you will find that interesting. They found that when you put a child inside an MRI machine, the child would not stay there. They would want to come out immediately. They would not sit still. Whatever you do, a child would not want to stay there. It's so boring, it's so scary, it's claustrophobic. I just don't want to be there. What they did was they built a simple machine which had all kinds of cartoon characters on the inside and outside. And they could continue to play while they are inside the MRI machine. That had a lot of children staying inside the machine, at least for a couple of minutes, that would enable the doctors to take the MRI. There are a lot more examples like that across the industry. I'm sure there's another very interesting one which is about the iron fish. This is a problem which was there in Cambodia where people were very anemic, and they did not have enough money to go and buy expensive medicines and all that. So what they did was simply create an iron fish. You put that in your boiling water, in the curries that you make, in whatever you're making, and keep consuming that. It's cheap, durable, and will just last you forever. So one of the things that might occur to you is, all of this works very well in such industries. What about our technology or software industries? Will this work for us? So there are many examples where you will see the focus on users specifically being on the, on the users, on how they work in IT industries or most of the software industries. This is the quick number I would like to share. This is a combination of the stock value of multiple, the top 500 US businesses over a period of time. It is compared something on what we call the S&P, that is the Standard & Poor. It is basically the stock value of the top 500 US companies based on the design value index, which means how do you design it, how much is the user-centric design, and what is the stock return for that. And if you look at it, some of the top IT companies would be in here. So companies which have high focus on design are the ones which are getting higher returns. It's 211% time more, and this is a recognized index across the world. Not just that, even from the employment point of view, what are the few top skills that we look for? I just heard Mr. Rajat talking about the problem-solving skill. In fact, if you look at it, some of the most in-demand skills are problem-solving, critical thinking, and creativity. Which means, if we want to succeed in our careers in the long term, these are the skills we need to develop. Today you may be learning C++, tomorrow Java, maybe Python, maybe Scala, whatever you are learning. Be rest assured, 3 years down the road or 4 years down the road, that will not be the primary technology. What is it that will help us get along? These are skills that would be required. It is important to learn a language, but it is equally important to focus on innovation, to focus on the problem-solving part of it. So what exactly is design thinking? Design thinking is problem solving. We heard about, a lot of people saying critical problem solving Problem solving is an important skill. Have you all heard that? Yes? No? How do you do problem solving? Have you ever heard that one? How should you be innovative? Everybody says you should be innovative, and all of us agree to that. But how do you be innovative? How can you be innovative? Can I just say, okay, let's sit down for 5 minutes and give me some 10 ideas? Does that work? Not really. Then what works? So design thinking is an approach which says that the innovation can be designed in. You can structure it and bring in the maximum value. So it is focused on users. We saw that when you don't focus on users, there are a whole lot of things that happen, right? Not all of them are successful. No matter how much money you put in, not all the innovations are successful. You can think of multiple such examples. How many of you have heard about Apple Maps? And you also know that it was withdrawn, right? Why do you think it was withdrawn? Its inaccuracy was, of course, a part of it. But people were so used to working the Google way that they didn't want to change. It was built on Android phones, which would be used by majority of the people. So when you try to mandate something which is not as per your usage habits, you don't like it. It's as simple as that. Similarly, if you were to design a user interface for somebody who's, let's say, in college, vis-a-vis somebody who's a senior citizen, would the UX differ? Of course it would. The way they operate, the way they think would be different. So design thinking is innovation plus people plus technology, all of it together. And here it says that design thinking is a way in which you have a option, or you are thinking about the users before you actually go down and try to solve a problem. First, we need to understand who the users are. 2, we need to understand what those users want and what is the problem that we are trying to solve. Many a times it's like the scenario where we say that we want to build a cheaper incubator rather than saying we want to keep the babies warm. Though eventually, if you look at it at a very high level, they may seem to be broadly the same thing. But because of the way you phrased your question, those things would differ. So how does this work? In design thinking, there are certain principles of design thinking. The first one is empathize. Identify who are the users. In fact, let's say when the Facebook put up the like button, right? If you were to think of one universal symbol which was, to say like, what would it be? It would be thumbs up. No matter what the age, criteria, which geography you are from, which language you speak, that was a common icon. Or a smiley is a common icon. So that is something that can be drawn in. But you would have come across smileys which are very confusing to us, or icons which are very confusing because it is very specific to that language or culture, and not everybody understands it. So the first thing is to empathize, identify who your users are. The next thing is state the problem statement properly. What exactly is the problem you are trying to solve? There's a very interesting example here. This is from Amazon, and a lot of this is public knowledge. You would be able to find it on YouTube and everywhere. So when Amazon was looking at the data and trying to figure out who are the, what kind of shopping experiences people are having, they realized that around 40% of the orders get cancelled or, do not happen properly, or people just don't want, they just change their mind. It's as simple as that. I wanted to buy this, now I don't want to buy it. What do you do about this? Then they went back to the users and started asking, what's happening here? On one hand, their database was getting clogged with all the things which are in the cart which are not moving. People have changed their mind and they can't do it. And on the second hand, things were not moving as fast. What they did then was talk to the users and realize this is a common problem. You are forcing me to register, log in, and then place an order, but I just changed my mind. I don't want this now, or I found a better deal somewhere. That's when, at a later stage, Amazon introduced something called continue as guest. I'm not going to force you to register. If you like it, you continue. And if you really want to check it out, you place the order then. You don't have to do it right now. So what happened was they understood the user flow, defined the problem, and then went about solving that. In fact, in the work that I do in terms of managing some of the larger teams, whenever we need ideas, we follow this approach on who is our customer, what do they want done, and then go about trying to solve that. Otherwise, many a times we end up solving the wrong problems that the client was not even interested in. Once we do that, once you have a problem defined, start building prototypes. Many a times what happens is, you have an idea, you build a prototype, come back after 1 year and ask the users, has it worked? And most of the times it doesn't. In fact, this Zune was a very good example of that. When Apple introduced iPod, they said that you can carry 1,000 songs in your pocket, and it became very popular. Everybody started sitting up and taking notice, because before that it was the Sony Walkmans and all that people had with very limited things. So people said, yeah, why don't we do that? Then Zune comes in. What they do is, they have all the features that iPod has and a little more features, but it still doesn't work. Have you even heard of Zune? No? So look it up, it's an interesting product. It was introduced and withdrawn within a year and a half. One of the epic failures in the technology, in fact. So what they realized is the users would want to operate in a particular way, and there's no point in...
Now we already, we have a lot of ideas, we build a prototype. So now the main problem comes is, how do people, your user, interact with that prototype? So for example, let us take, if you build any such thing, would you go with a 3D model, or you even give a diagram, or you give, so how do you make the user understand the prototype? Let us forget about the final product. Even the prototype for testing and debugging, how do you make it understand to the user?
Okay, depends on the product. Drawings obviously don't work. Okay, so drawings are totally out. So you can either look at it, if it is a concrete product, for example, if it's something like the incubator we were talking about, or Ironfish, you can have a cardboard based simple model to go back and say, if this works, will you use it? Otherwise, even if you build a simple dummy prototype using HTML, you can just click. There are many products which allow you to do a very quick and a dirty design on the net. You could do that. It will, what it would have is, you click here, it will take you to a dummy defined page, but that will still work. So it will give a feel to the user on how this works. So that's the best way.
In there, coming in from there. Yeah.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
For example, if a 4-year child has to go for a MRI scan, if she had some problem with suffering from a brain problem, then if she is feared of going for an MRI scan, then what are the steps to be taken to make her free to go to that MRI scan?
I wish it was a technology problem to solve, but yes, what GE has done is, for similar problem, they put in cartoons and games inside the MRI machine. That was the example I was giving earlier. So not all people have it, but that was one of the innovative approach they took, saying that once I put the child inside, and there are cartoons and something to keep the child distracted for that couple of minutes, that will work. So when we have those kind of things, it's good. But if we don't, we need to think of creative ways. Maybe, put up a sticker, send something with the child, some paper that will keep the child engaged for those 2 minutes that are required.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, madam. I am Dr. Nandish, professor from Indus Business Academy.
Hello.
I have been teaching this course to the students. Now, from that experience, don't you think this course is an integral part of any program? But unfortunately, most of the universities do not have. Having seen the other side of the industry where students do not have, or maybe the employees do not have, especially the young folks, I would like you to throw light on it. Of course, you and I can't do anything about it, but at least the audience should know that it's one of the very, very important area.
Definitely. I totally agree with you. In fact, I also go in for campus recruitments from my company. A lot of times when we ask students questions on theory, right, they are very good with that. But if you really ask them, there is a problem, how will you go solving about it? We have no idea. We kind of blank out. Not just that. In any real situation, it doesn't work. In the corporate world, definitely there's a lot of focus on that. In fact, within my company, I work for Accenture, and there is a huge thriving community on design thinking. I'm one of the coaches. There are many other coaches who work on design thinking, promoting innovations. One of the things that we have started doing on the corporate side is, instead of saying, what are your requirements? If you remember in the olden days, we would say there would be a business analyst, he will give in those requirements, we'll start designing, prepare a BRD and all those things, right? All those things are there, but not, the first focus is how do we conduct a workshop with the client to understand what your requirements are. So we don't start with a requirement document, we start with a workshop, we start with talking to users. And these are some of the principles which are there. I'm really happy to know that you are teaching that, and I really wish we had more of that in the academia too. Thank you so much.
Memento from us. Volunteers, can we have the memento? Yeah.